Good day, and welcome to General Answers Weekly Wraps. I'm Vav Govender, and as usual, what we'll do is we'll start off some general market stories and end up with a tech segment at the end. In this week's general market macro stories, we have to again cover elections. It's been quite an eventful week in the UK, the US, and in France as well. Then we'll also look at US jobs numbers and EU inflation. And we'll end up with a little bit on Tesla, the massive recovery the stock has had over the last couple of weeks, and maybe some reasons for optimism going forward, as well as Elon Musk's prediction for the valuation of the company in a few years' time. Okay, let's start off with the election, wrap up. So this in the US, obviously no elections just yet, but this is the week after Biden's horrendous debate with Donald Trump. By all estimates, it was the worst performance by any candidate in any debate ever. He came off as being very, very old. Do not know some key facts. In fact, many accused Trump of lying, but in this particular thing, one of the key things he said, which I think was easily verifiable and easily debunked, was the fact that he said no American soldier had died while he had been president. That's not true. It's just factually not true. Just in the withdrawal of Afghanistan, there were deaths. This is something, of course, that was a lie, and there were other things that indicated that he kind of lost his train of thought. There was a part where he kind of rambled at the end of one of his segments, and Donald Trump basically responded by saying, "I don't know what he said. I don't think he knows what he said" as well, indicating that even Trump was realizing that he was not totally there. Later on, this was blamed on him being jet lagged and having a cold. And there's also talk that apparently he's only viable or functional effectively between about 10 o'clock and 4 o'clock or 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock, something like that there. And after about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he gets a bit ditzy. This is what's called sundowning. It's an indicator of dementia because people with dementia often get quite disorientated later in the night. This is, you would expect after a performance like this that a resignation would have been quite appropriate. At least basically he's saying he's not going to resign from the presidency, but he's going to not run as the candidate. It has not yet happened as I speak to you. However, over the last couple of days, it's emerged that there's a couple of technical factors that are going to make it very difficult for anyone besides Kamala Harris to replace him. Number one is the fact that the way the U.S. Campaign finance system works, if he was to drop out, the only person that could access $1 billion worth of funding that he has basically raised is Kamala Harris. If it's not her, then all those funds have to be returned to donors and hopefully have them send it back to the campaign. That would be quite a hit. You'd probably lose a significant chunk of that money if that was to occur. So that's one thing. The second thing is that due to the nature of the Democratic Party, you find that the issues around identity politics and so on are quite strong there. And Kamala Harris, as being a woman of color, hits two significant constituencies. One is obviously women, and the other one is people of color. And if you were to replace her, for instance, with some of the other people being discussed, someone like, for instance, Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, you'd probably offend those particular constituencies. So that is another thing working in her favor. And the latest betting markets have put her as above Joe Biden in terms of the likely candidate for the election. And she's basically roughly equal to Biden plus pretty much every other candidate out there as being the most likely option for the election or the Democratic ticket on the election. Basically, it means that if you bet against her and you take the rest of the field, you get the same kind of odds as just betting on her alone. So that's showing that she's clearly the favorite to run for the presidency. The question then arises is that is she going to run the presidency as the vice president or as the sitting president? Because if Biden's going to say he's too old to run as president for a second term, is he not also too old to be president currently? It's not exactly like the presidency is a simple job that you can, just hold on to, no matter what. So yeah, that is the U.S. election. Then the French election. The French election, the first round came through. The way the French election works is as follows. What happens is you vote in the first round, and unless you have more than 50% of the vote, and at least I think a quarter of the people in the different districts voting, you basically have to go to a second round election. So if you get more than 50% of the vote and about at least a quarter of the people vote, you can win that seat outright. Hardly ever happens that the majority of seats are won like that. Only the minority of seats are won like that. And the majority of seats are won in the second round when what happens is the smaller parties drop out, and there's another round of elections, and whoever wins that one gets the seat. What usually happens in France, which is I think a feature of their system, is that in the first round you may have a party winning or getting like a large chunk of seats without outright winning them, and in fact they may be disliked by more than half the population. And then the second round, what happens is there's a discussion among the opposition that lost as to who they're going to back against the winning party, and that basically becomes the opposition against the winning party in the second round, and they basically have a much better chance of winning, because you'd have like a couple parties coming together to kind of pool their votes to go against the winning party in the first round. This has worked out really well for Macron in the past, because he's not the number one choice, but once you get to the second round, when it's him versus a right-wing party, usually he looks a lot better, and therefore that has helped him win. And the question here, or this time around, is the fact that he's not the second. Often he's the third. So he's going to be willing to basically do the same that others have done for him, in that basically in the past others have supported him against the right wing. Will he be willing to support others against the right wing? And that is the determining factor of the next election. It's going to happen on Sunday, on 30th. On the 7th. And then finally the UK election just occurred on the 4th of July. Labour has won, as had been thought. The Conservatives didn't do great, but didn't do as badly as had been feared. But 120 votes or so. Conservative Labour got 400 plus. You can see it's a pretty big landslide, but the landslide had been predicted. Just the scale of the landslide had not been determined. And this is, in terms of the predictions, close to the better end for the Conservatives. I mean, there were some people predicting as little as 60 or 70 seats. The other big news of it is that Reform got the third number of seats, the largest number of seats. They look at the moment, as I speak to you, to have gotten 4 seats. The third number of votes, but they've looked at the moment to get about 4 seats. It sounds weird when there's a party like the Lib Democrats, Lib Dems, who basically have gotten less votes than the Reform Party, but have gotten, I think, 60 seats or so. So yeah, Reform is going to basically look at the moment at 4 seats. I told you in the past it's 3 to 5 seats, and this is pretty much in the middle. However, the number of votes seems to be closer to like 15%, which is slightly above what we anticipated, but we'll still have to see what the results are looking at finally. We were talking about like 13% of the vote. So yeah, anticipated Reform did reasonably well. It remains to be seen whether or not Nigel Farage can build on this for the next election. Now, people often look at the BBC and come up with the conclusion that Nigel Farage is a bit of a clown and that he's not someone to be taken seriously, but that's a totally wrong impression. Nigel Farage is probably the most gifted politician in the UK, and has been probably the most gifted politician in the UK for a generation. The reason that his UKIP party is not a major player in the UK elections is because they came up with a platform, Brexit. They ran on that platform. They got a couple of seats. Then they disappeared. Why? Because they got everything they wanted. They pretty much were too successful. He's the reason that the UK has a Brexit. He pushed the Conservatives to get the Brexit vote in, and he pushed for the win. And so the last time he tried something like this year, he was so successful, his party basically dissolved because they got everything they wanted. Let's just see what he can do this time around. For those that don't know, the Reform is a very right-wing party, anti-immigrant, but it's this is not a right-wing party like the Republicans are a right-wing party. There's less of the economic stuff, much more of the cultural and immigration stuff, just like the Marine Le Pen in France. Marine Le Pen is not going to be out there cutting, spending with government. She's more likely to be basically, talking about more populist measures like, helping pensions and so on. Okay, now moving on to some more economic news. We had EU inflation coming out this week, 2.5%, a little better than expected. The chance of rate cut in the EU is getting up quite strong, I think, at the moment. Or more rate cuts in the EU are getting, much stronger at the moment. I think that we are seeing indicators that inflation, at least for the short term, is coming down. And not just in the EU, but elsewhere in the world as well. And that, I think, is going to be a bit positive for not just, low interest rates, but stronger stock markets as well. We're also getting US job numbers, as I speak to you, not out just yet, but we expect them to be reasonably firm, but, it's not indicating a thriving job market. Combine that with, like I said, weak inflation coming through. Again, the US might be looking to cut rates earlier. I had thought that, this might be a bigger play in the US election, but that was before all the last week's debate occurred. And like I said, when I watched the debate, I was pretty surprised by just how out of it Joe Biden is, and that's thrown the US electoral system into such a disarray that I don't know what the driving factors are going to be even for the election. But those that don't know, currently Trump is winning that election pretty handily. If held today, he'd win not just like marginally, he'd win by a landslide probably. In terms of electoral votes, he'd probably even win the popular vote, which is something unusual because we haven't had a Democrat win the popular vote for quite some, a Republican win the popular vote for quite some time. Okay, and then moving on to the last bit we're talking about is Tesla. Now, Tesla has rallied up quite significantly, and in fact, is actually, as I speak to you yesterday, went basically positive for the year. At one point in time, it was down more than 20% of the year. It had gone, like at $150, a share. As I speak to you, it's closer to $250 a share. What has happened? Firstly, we talked a while back about that vote with Elon Musk occurring, and I think that was a key factor. It's very clear that Tesla is not valued as a car company, but as a tech company. And what makes it a tech company is the CEO. Like him or hate him, Musk is an unusual figure that has a certain ability to turn, science fiction kind of scenarios into reality. Starlink is an incredible service. It is something that is a differentiator and cannot be basically taken down by many other competitors out there. In fact, no other competitors at the moment are accepting comparable to Starlink. That is his satellite internet service. Around about 60% of all the satellites in the world, around the world at the moment, is basically Elon Musk Starlink. Think about that. We've been going to space since the 1950s. Okay, that's when the Sputnik went up. They've had the US, NASA, they've had a whole bunch of stuff over that time. We're talking about 60 plus years of space, exploration, putting satellites in space, etc. And Elon Musk has more than half of all the satellites in space at the moment. One man, not a country. And I think the latest valuation for SpaceX is something like $210 billion. Now, with Tesla, he's come up with a valuation, I don't know how he got this exact number, where he thinks Tesla could be a $30 trillion company. $30 trillion company. That's 10 times larger than the largest company in the world right now. That is a very optimistic estimate, but look at Musk, you can't bet against him. And the reasoning for this is the robotaxis, which is obviously one thing, but he's becoming really strong on the Optimus. The Optimus is the robot. And in fact, in numerous times has said that the Optimus robot is likely to be the biggest driver for Tesla's growth. It's more important than the cars. So Tesla is not a car company, it's a robot company. Now, is this real or not? What you must understand is the following. We already have the bodies for robots. We built the bodies a while back. Looking at Boston Dynamics, looking at even the Tesla Optimus, looking at the stuff from China. Not only do we have the robots, we have the ability to produce them really cheaply, cheaper than you think. Even before we entered a place where we are doing them through mass production, you have robots that you can buy that are physically able to do a lot of stuff you want them to do, clean your house, cook your food, that kind of stuff, for something like 170,000 rands. You're talking about that kind of level. Probably $10,000 or so is something that you can think of as being a reasonable number you can put out there. There's some of these dog robots that Boston Dynamics are making, but it can be made in China for like $4,000. That's basically less than 100,000 rands. These are things that are incredibly, useful in a number of different ways. The dog robot, by the way, in China, they put a machine gun on the top of it. You imagine a device like a dog robot with a machine gun on top of it, able to go upstairs through doorways, that kind of stuff that a human being can go through, or what a dog can do, with a gun on top. And they're $4,000 a piece for, say, $100 million, which is not a huge amount of money in military terms. You could have basically thousands of these things, attack a city, attack an army. It would be an incredible military asset. And like I said, the humanoid robots, $10,000, $15,000. There seems to be companies able to make these things at that kind of range and pricing. And that's before, like I said, we have mass production come into place, assembly lines and so on that are really going to be making these things much cheaper. When all is said and done, I wouldn't be surprised if, like, when mass production comes out of these things, they'd be sitting around the $5,000-$6,000 level. I mean, again, I'm talking about 100,000 rands or so. All we lack right now is the brain power, and it remains to be seen whether that can be solved. But if it can be solved, Tesla is likely the one that's going to be solving it first, because they have the most comprehensive data set in terms of real world interactions of any company in the world, from its Tesla car fleet. It's not even close. I think each Tesla car that they basically are in the system is giving like 10 gigs of data every night over to Tesla. They have millions of cars. This is a database that's beyond anything else that anyone else in the world has on real world interactions. And if this does come through, it's possible that Tesla's $30 trillion valuation can be reached. But like with Musk, you have to be taking these things with a pinch of salt. Sometimes he gets his stuff right, more often than should be reasonable, but not always. And when he does get them right, even then, he's going to do that usually at a longer timeline than he usually gives out in advance. If it was according to Musk's predictions, we'd be in Mars right now. We'd have driverless cars already on the streets. There'll be robotaxi already in the street, and we've been there for a few years already. That being said, we are on the way to Mars. It does look like driverless cars are pretty much here, and the robotaxi will probably be around in no time at all. Okay, that's it for this week. Thanks for joining me, and I look forward to speaking to you again next week. Cheers.